Hashtag my mother-in-law replaced my birth control pills. The pharmacy records exposed her plan. My mother-in-law volunteered to pick up my birth control prescription to save me a trip whenever I was working late. Through 3 months of taking my pills religiously but still getting morning sickness, the pharmacist's record showed she'd been buying prenatal vitamins and switching them. What happened next destroyed her relationship with her son forever. Before I dive into this story of medical manipulation and the most shocking family betrayal imaginable, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you've ever had in-laws cross dangerous boundaries, and subscribe to True Revenge for more stories of family deception exposed through careful documentation. My name is Sarah, I'm 28 years old, and until 6 months ago I trusted my mother-in-law with my most personal medical information. This story begins with helpful offers and ends with evidence that proved attempted reproductive coercion, a crime that could have destroyed my marriage and my career. I've been married to my husband David for 2 years. We live in Portland, Oregon, where I work as a pediatric nurse at Oregon Health and Amp Science University. David works as an engineering consultant, and we both have demanding careers that require careful family planning. When we got married, David and I were clear that we wanted to wait at least 5 years before having children. We wanted to establish our careers, save money, travel together, and build a strong foundation for our marriage before adding the complexity of parenthood. I've been on birth control since I was 19, initially for medical reasons and later for family planning. I'm extremely disciplined about taking my pills at the same time every day, 7 a.m. sharp, no exceptions. As a healthcare professional, I understand how critical consistency is for hormonal contraception effectiveness. David's mother, Janet, has always been what you might generously call involved in our relationship. She's 58 years old, retired from her job as an elementary school secretary, and has made clear from day one that her primary interest in me is my potential as a vessel for grandchildren. "When are you two going to give me grandbabies?" was literally the first question Janet asked me when David introduced us 3 years ago. Not "how did you two meet" or "what do you do for work," but straight to my reproductive timeline. During our wedding planning, Janet made countless comments about how marriage was God's way of preparing women for motherhood, and how she hoped we wouldn't wait too long to start our real family. "Careers are temporary," she'd say whenever I mentioned my work at the hospital. "But being a mother is forever. That's a woman's true calling." David would occasionally tell his mother to back off, but he generally treated her comments as harmless enthusiasm rather than the invasive boundary violations they actually were. Through our wedding, Janet's baby obsession intensified. She started showing up to family gatherings with baby clothes she'd found on sale, and couldn't resist purchasing for her future grandchildren. She'd make comments about how I looked tired or pale and suggest I might need to slow down at work to focus on more important things. She'd ask pointed questions about my health, my menstrual cycle, and whether David and I were really trying to have children. "You know, Sarah," she said during one particularly uncomfortable Thanksgiving dinner, "accidents happen to the best of us. Sometimes God has different plans than we do." The way she smiled when she said it should have been my first warning sign. Janet also started inserting herself into our domestic life in ways that felt increasingly intrusive. She'd offer to clean our house when we were busy with work, always focusing on organizing our bedroom and bathroom areas. "I just want to help you two get settled," she'd explain when I found her rearranging our medicine cabinet or reorganizing my dresser drawers. David saw his mother's behavior as helpful and caring. I saw it as boundary crossing and inappropriate, but I tried to be understanding because I knew Janet meant a lot to David and I wanted to maintain family harmony. The real manipulation began 4 months ago when my work schedule became particularly demanding. I was pulling 12-hour shifts at the hospital, often working 6 days a week during a staffing shortage in the pediatric unit. The demands of my job meant I was frequently running errands during off hours or asking David to handle household tasks I normally managed myself. One of those tasks was picking up my monthly birth control prescription from our local CVS pharmacy. I'd been getting my pills from the same pharmacy for 3 years. The staff knew me, I'd set up automatic refills, and the process was usually seamless. But during this busy period at work, I was often stuck at the hospital when the pharmacy closed, making it difficult to pick up my prescription on time. That's when Janet made her fateful offer. "Sarah, you're working so hard," she said during a family dinner. "Let me help with some of your errands. I can pick up your prescriptions, do grocery shopping, whatever you need." "That's very kind, Janet, but I can manage," I replied, not wanting to burden her with my personal responsibilities. "Nonsense," she insisted. "I'm retired, I have plenty of time, and I want to support my hard-working daughter-in-law. David, tell Sarah to let me help." David immediately endorsed his mother's offer. "Mom's right, Sarah. You're exhausted and she's offering to help. Let her pick up your prescriptions and groceries. It would take some pressure off you." Against my better judgment, I agreed to let Janet help with errands, including picking up my birth control prescription. First month, everything seemed normal. Janet picked up my birth control pills along with David's allergy medication and a few other pharmacy items. She delivered everything to our house the same day, and I thanked her for the help. The second month, Janet again offered to handle the pharmacy run. "I'm going there anyway for my own medications," she said. "No sense in you making a separate trip when you're so busy at the hospital." I gave her my prescription information and she returned with my pills that evening. Everything appeared normal, same brand, same packaging, same pill appearance. I continued taking them religiously at 7 a.m. every morning. The third month followed the same pattern. Janet picked up my prescription, delivered it promptly, and I continued my normal routine of taking one pill every morning at exactly the same time. But during that third month, I started experiencing some unusual symptoms. First, I began feeling nauseous in the mornings. As a healthcare professional, I initially attributed this to work stress, irregular eating schedules, and the demanding nature of my job. Hospital work can be physically and emotionally exhausting, and nausea isn't uncommon when you're running on adrenaline and minimal sleep. Second, I noticed that my breasts felt tender and slightly swollen. Again, I chalked this up to work stress and the physical demands of lifting patients and working long shifts. Third, I started feeling unusually fatigued even on my days off. I was sleeping more than usual but still waking up tired. I assumed this was my body's way of recovering from the intense work schedule I'd been maintaining. The symptoms continued for about 2 weeks before I started connecting the dots. I'm a pediatric nurse. I've seen thousands of pregnant women bring their children to our hospital. I've observed every early pregnancy symptom imaginable, and I know exactly what morning sickness, breast tenderness, and fatigue look like in combination. But I also knew I was taking birth control pills religiously, never missing a dose, never taking them late. The possibility of pregnancy seemed impossible given my careful contraception management. Till the symptoms were undeniable. I decided to take a pregnancy test, more to rule out pregnancy than because I expected a positive result. Test was positive. I stared at those 2 pink lines in complete shock. I took 3 more tests from different brands, all of which were positive. I was definitely pregnant, despite taking birth control consistently for 3 months. My first thought was that the birth control must have failed somehow. Hormonal contraception is highly effective but not 100% guaranteed, and I assumed I was experiencing the small percentage of breakthrough pregnancies that can occur even with perfect pill usage. My second thought was panic. David and I had been clear about waiting 5 years to start a family. We hadn't prepared financially or emotionally for a baby. My career was at a critical point, and pregnancy would significantly impact my ability to work the demanding shifts required in pediatric nursing. My third thought was confusion. How had this happened when I'd been so careful with my contraception? I decided to make an appointment with my gynecologist to confirm the pregnancy and discuss my options. I also decided to wait to tell David until I had more information about how far along I was and what had caused the contraception failure. During my appointment with Dr. Martinez, she confirmed that I was about 6 weeks pregnant. The timing lined up with my last menstrual period, and all the early pregnancy indicators were consistent with what I'd been experiencing. Dr. Martinez, I said, I need to understand how this happened. I've been taking birth control pills consistently for years, never missing doses, always taking them at the same time. How could I be pregnant? She asked detailed questions about my pill-taking routine, whether I'd been sick, whether I'd taken any medications that might interfere with hormonal contraception, and whether I'd noticed anything unusual about my pills. Have you noticed any changes in the pills themselves? She asked. Different color, size, packaging, or effects? I thought about it carefully. No, they look exactly the same as always. Same brand, same appearance, same packaging. Sometimes generic substitutions can cause issues, she said. Let me ask, have you been getting your prescription from the same pharmacy? Yes, the same CVS I've used for 3 years. And you've been picking them up yourself? That's when I paused. Actually, no. For the past 3 months, my mother-in-law has been picking them up for me because I've been working long hours at the hospital. Dr. Martinez looked concerned. Sarah, I want you to go to your pharmacy and ask to speak with the pharmacist about your prescription history. Ask them to print out exactly what's been dispensed for the past 6 months. Make sure the medication you've been receiving is actually birth control pills. Her suggestion sent a chill down my spine. You think someone might have tampered with my prescription? I think you need to verify exactly what medication you've been taking, she said carefully. Pregnancy despite consistent birth control use is unusual enough to warrant investigation. I left Dr. Martinez's office with a growing sense of dread. Possibility that someone had deliberately interfered with my contraception was almost too horrible to consider, but the evidence was hard to ignore. I drove straight from the doctor's office to CVS and asked to speak with the head pharmacist, Michelle, who I'd known for 3 years. Michelle, I need you to print out my complete prescription history for the past 6 months, I said. Specifically, I need to know exactly what medication has been dispensed and who picked up each prescription. Michelle looked at me with concern. Is everything okay, Sarah? Is there a problem with your medication? I'm pregnant despite taking birth control religiously for 3 months, I said. My doctor wants me to verify what medication I've actually been receiving. Michelle's expression became very serious. Let me pull up your records right now. She spent several minutes reviewing her computer system, printing out detailed records and cross-referencing information. When she finished, her face was pale. Sarah, according to our records for the past 3 months, your birth control prescription has been picked up by Janet Patterson, who identified herself as your mother-in-law. That's correct, I said. She was helping me with errands. But here's what's concerning, Michelle continued. Each time Janet picked up your birth control, she also purchased a bottle of prenatal vitamins. Same brand, same quantity as your birth control pills. My heart started racing. What does that mean? I can't prove anything definitively, Michelle said, but it's highly unusual for someone to purchase prenatal vitamins at the same time they're picking up birth control for another person. The timing suggests possible substitution. She showed me the receipts. For 3 months, every time Janet had picked up my birth control prescription, she had also purchased a bottle of prenatal vitamins that were identical in size and shape to my birth control pills. Michelle, is there any way to test whether the pills I've been taking are actually birth control? We can't test pills that have already been consumed, she said, but I can show you the difference between your actual birth control pills and the prenatal vitamins that were purchased. She brought out samples of both. The birth control pills were small, white, and had specific markings indicating the manufacturer and dosage. Prenatal vitamins were also small and white, but with different markings. Looking at them side by side, I realized I hadn't been paying close attention to the specific markings on my pills. I'd been trusting that the pills Janet delivered were the same ones I'd been taking for years. Sarah, Michelle said gently, I think you need to confront Janet about this. The pattern of purchases suggests deliberate substitution of your birth control with prenatal vitamins. I thanked Michelle and asked her to print out complete records of Janet's purchases, including dates, times, and security camera timestamps. If my mother-in-law had been systematically replacing my birth control pills, I was going to need evidence. The drive home was one of the longest of my life. I had to process the possibility that Janet had deliberately sabotaged my contraception to force me into an unplanned pregnancy. The violation was almost incomprehensible. When I arrived home, David was in the living room watching television. Janet was in the kitchen, cleaning dishes and humming happily to herself. "Hi, Sarah," Janet called out cheerfully. "How was your day at the hospital?" I looked at this woman who had potentially committed a serious crime against me while acting like a loving mother-in-law, and I felt physically sick. "Janet, I need to talk to you about something important," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Of course, dear. What's on your mind?" David looked up from the television. "Everything okay?" "I'm pregnant," I announced, watching both of their reactions carefully. David's face went through several expressions: shock, confusion, and then gradual happiness. "Pregnant? But we were waiting. How did this happen?" Janet's reaction was very different. She immediately broke into a huge smile and clapped her hands together. "Oh my goodness! This is wonderful news. I'm going to be a grandmother." Her joy seemed genuine, but it also seemed like the reaction of someone who had been expecting this announcement. "Janet," I said, "I need to ask you some specific questions about my birth control prescription." Her smile faltered slightly. "Your birth control? What about it?" I pulled out the pharmacy records Michelle had printed for me. "For the past 3 months, every time you picked up my birth control pills, you also purchased prenatal vitamins. Can you explain why?" Janet's face went completely pale. I don't know what you mean. The pharmacist showed me the receipts," I continued. "Same day, same transaction, every month. Birth control pills for me, prenatal vitamins for you." "Why would you need prenatal vitamins, Janet?" David looked confused. "Mom, what's Sarah talking about?" Janet started stammering. The prenatal vitamins were for? I thought maybe if Sarah got pregnant, she'd need them." "Janet," I said firmly, "did you replace my birth control pills with prenatal vitamins?" Question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Janet looked at David, then at me, then back at David. Her face was cycling through multiple emotions: guilt, defiance, panic, and calculation. "I don't know why you're accusing me of something so ridiculous," she finally said, but her voice was shaky and unconvincing. "Because the pharmacy has security cameras," I replied. "And because I'm going to have the prenatal vitamins you purchased tested to see if they match the pills you've been giving me." That's when Janet broke down completely. "I just wanted you to experience the joy of motherhood," she burst out. "You were wasting your fertile years focusing on work when you could be giving David children. I was trying to help you." David stood up from the couch, his face a mixture of horror and disbelief. "Mom, did you tamper with Sarah's medication?" "I replaced some of her birth control pills with vitamins," Janet admitted through tears. "Not all of them, just enough to give nature a chance to work. I thought if Sarah got pregnant, she'd realize how wonderful being a mother could be." The room fell into stunned silence. "Janet," I said, my voice barely controlled, "what you did is reproductive coercion. It's a crime. You violated my bodily autonomy and my right to make my own reproductive choices." "I was trying to help," she insisted. "You would have thanked me eventually." David was staring at his mother like he'd never seen her before. "Mom, you can't force someone to get pregnant. What you did is. It's assault. Don't be dramatic, David. I'm your mother and Sarah is my daughter-in-law. I was looking out for both of you." "By committing a felony," I said. "Tampering with someone's medication without their consent is illegal, Janet. Reproductive coercion is illegal." Janet's defiance crumbled into panic. "You're not going to call the police, are you?" "I'm family." "You stopped being family the moment you violated my medical autonomy," I replied. I turned to David. I need you to understand that your mother deliberately sabotaged my birth control to force me into an unplanned pregnancy. She committed a crime against me, and she did it because she decided her desires for grandchildren were more important than my reproductive choices. David was quiet for several minutes, processing the magnitude of what his mother had done. "Mom," he finally said, "you have to leave. Now. And you can't come back until Sarah decides whether she wants to press charges. David, you can't choose her over your own mother." Janet pleaded. "I'm choosing my wife over someone who committed a crime against her," David corrected. "What you did is unforgivable." Janet tried several more appeals, but David remained firm. She gathered her things and left, still insisting that she'd been trying to help and that we'd thank her someday. After Janet left, David and I had the most difficult conversation of our marriage. "Sarah, I am so sorry," he said. "I had no idea my mother was capable of something like this. I should have recognized her boundary violations earlier and put a stop to them." "David, your mother didn't just cross boundaries. She committed reproductive assault. She violated my body and my choices in one of the most fundamental ways possible." "I know. I'm horrified. I'm angry. I don't know how to process that my own mother could do something so evil." We talked for hours about what Janet's crime meant for our marriage, our future, and our family relationships. David was supportive and understanding, but the violation had fundamentally changed our dynamic. I was pregnant against my will due to deliberate sabotage by a family member. Every aspect of our carefully planned timeline had been destroyed by Janet's selfish desires. The next day, I consulted with a family law attorney about my options for pursuing charges against Janet. "What your mother-in-law did constitutes reproductive coercion," the attorney explained. "It's a form of domestic violence that's increasingly recognized by law enforcement and courts." "What would happen if I pressed charges?" "She could face charges for assault, tampering with medication, and potentially conspiracy. The penalties vary by state, but this is definitely prosecutable." I spent several days considering whether to involve law enforcement. On one hand, Janet had committed a serious crime that deserved legal consequences. On the other hand, pressing charges would create a permanent rift in David's family and potentially complicate our marriage. Ultimately, I decided to give Janet one opportunity to acknowledge the severity of her actions and make meaningful amends before involving the police. I arranged to meet with Janet at a neutral location, a coffee shop near her house, to discuss the situation. "Janet," I began, "you violated my body, my autonomy, and my trust in the most fundamental way possible. What you did was criminal and it has consequences." "Sarah, I've been thinking about this and I realize I may have overstepped some boundaries." "You committed reproductive assault," I interrupted. "This isn't about overstepping boundaries. This is about you deciding that your desires were more important than my bodily autonomy." Janet tried to minimize her actions. "I only replaced some of the pills. I wasn't trying to hurt you. You replaced enough pills to get me pregnant against my will. That's not a small transgression, Janet. That's a life-altering crime." I laid out my conditions for not pressing charges. First, Janet would pay for all pregnancy-related medical costs, including prenatal care, delivery, and postnatal care, regardless of what I decided about the pregnancy. Second, Janet would attend counseling to address her boundary violations and controlling behavior. Third, Janet would have no contact with me or any future children until she completed counseling and I determined whether a relationship was possible. Fourth, Janet would provide a written acknowledgement that what she did was criminal and that she understood the severity of her actions. "If you refuse any of these conditions," I told her, "I will file charges immediately and pursue the maximum penalties allowed by law." Janet tried to negotiate, but I made clear that these were non-negotiable terms. 2 days later, Janet agreed to my conditions. She provided a written statement acknowledging that she had unlawfully tampered with Sarah's medication to cause an unplanned pregnancy, and that her actions constituted reproductive coercion and assault. Janet also agreed to pay all medical costs and attend counseling, though she continued to insist that her motivations had been loving rather than criminal. David was relieved that I wasn't pressing charges, but he remained furious with his mother and committed to supporting whatever decisions I made about our pregnancy and our future family relationships. Through extensive discussions with David, my doctor, and a counselor, I decided to continue the pregnancy. The violation of how the pregnancy occurred was horrific, but I wanted to separate Janet's crimes from my feelings about potentially becoming a mother. Pregnancy proceeded normally, and I gave birth to a healthy daughter 6 months later. David and I named her Emma, and we've built a loving family despite the traumatic circumstances of her conception. Janet has been attending counseling and has made progress in understanding the severity of her actions. She's paid all medical costs as agreed and has respected the no-contact boundaries I established. After Emma's first birthday, I allowed limited, supervised contact between Janet and her granddaughter, but our relationship will never recover from her betrayal. The experience taught me several important lessons about boundaries, family dynamics, and reproductive autonomy. First, helpful family members who insert themselves into your personal medical decisions should be viewed with suspicion rather than gratitude. Second, reproductive coercion is a serious crime that can be committed by people who claim to love you. Intent doesn't minimize the violation. Third, documentation and evidence are crucial when confronting family members who violate boundaries. Without the pharmacy records, I never could have proven what Janet had done. Most importantly, no one has the right to make reproductive choices for another person, regardless of their relationship or their claimed motivations. If you've experienced reproductive coercion or medical tampering by family members, know that what happened to you was criminal, not loving. Seek support, document everything, and don't let anyone minimize the severity of the violation. If you enjoyed this story of medical manipulation and pharmacy evidence that exposed a mother-in-law's crime, please give this video a like and subscribe to True Revenge for more stories of family violations and the documentation that brought justice. Share your own experiences with boundary-crossing in-laws in the comments below. Have you ever had family members interfere with your medical decisions or reproductive choices? Remember that your body and your reproductive choices are yours alone, and anyone who violates that autonomy has committed a serious crime against you, regardless of their claimed motivations. Thank you for listening to my story of reproductive coercion and the pharmacy records that exposed the truth. Sometimes the best response to family crimes is comprehensive documentation and legal accountability.